Hi everyone, welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast, and today I want to talk about becoming a lendable borrower. So for many people, they obsess over property and wanting to get their next deal over the line. For underwriters, they obsess about the borrower. They want to know everything about you before they lend you any money. So in this episode, I want to talk about how you can become that lendable borrower, how you can have underwriters literally fighting over you in order to lend you money. So the first thing I want to talk about is what lenders really look for. So the first thing is they want honesty. That is, without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest thing that lenders look for. They want someone who is going to do what they say they're going to do. And we get this a lot. We get a lot of lenders who will constantly moan about borrowers who, they haven't done what they said they were going to do. They haven't done this. They haven't done that. So honesty is a massive, massive thing. They want a borrower who is, if they say they're going to do this, brilliant, it's done. We know it's done. Great. We have that trust, that implicit trust that it is going to get done. Second thing is they want competence. So they want someone who doesn't even necessarily need to be a serial developer, but someone who, when they jump on a Zoom call and start talking to them, they instantly have that thing of, you know what, this guy knows what they're doing, or this lady has an immense amount of knowledge who actually, all right, maybe hasn't done a development before, but actually is going to be able to go and deliver this project. So for many lenders, it's about that confidence of knowledge and actually, okay, you maybe don't know what you're doing, but you're willing to learn and get to that point. The other thing that they're really looking for, and we've had this come up on a lot of calls recently, is liquidity. Now, what that means is a lot of people, they will come out of, and every episode I say it, I always go on about this thing of 3-day courses and education, all this kind of thing. But it is really important because there are so many courses that are shit. Just to put it nicely, just really, really shit, because they don't give the truth. And the truth is that you cannot walk into a lender, ask for £1 million and have nothing behind you. It just doesn't work. They're not interested. The first thing they're going to ask when you are on a call is, okay, what other assets have you got? Okay, have you got your personal home? Have you got another buy-to-let? If the answer to both of those is no, you're already on the back foot. Now, where you can save that position is, okay, I haven't got a main residence, I haven't got a buy-to-let, but I've got 100 grand sat in the bank. Okay, all of a sudden, this is slightly more interesting, because all of a sudden, from a lender's perspective, okay, if shit hits the fan, we know that actually this guy's going to go to the bank, take 10 grand out, and is going to be able to save the situation. We know that they aren't going to be completely screwed over if the drawdown delays by a couple of days. We know they're not going to be completely screwed over if, for example, at the point of recording now, there's 3 inches of snow outside and most builders have stopped building. We know that that isn't going to kill the deal. So from a lender's perspective, they look at it and they say, right, okay, if you can't go and build for 2 or 3 days, are you then completely done, completely scuppered? And that's what they want to know. They want to know that you are liquid enough or have access to liquidity in order to keep the project going. And that's, I did an episode on this recently, and it doesn't necessarily need to be cash in the bank. It could be things like ISAs. It could be things like having access to investors. If your mum and dad, for example, have 100 grand sat in the bank and they're willing to say, yeah, of course, we'll lend you 20 grand here, 20 grand there, whatever to help. Not everyone has access to that, but let's say you're lucky enough to, then again, that could help. We've got someone at the moment who his mum and dad own quite a large unencumbered house, and they have said, look, if anything goes wrong, we're willing to refinance the home. He's an only child. We're willing to refinance the home because at the end of the day, it's your inheritance anyway. Things like that can help. We've got someone else who he doesn't have a main residence, doesn't have a buy-to-let. He had 100 grand of his own money in the bank, but he's also managed to go and raise another 100 grand through investors, which again adds to that liquidity. So from the lender's perspective, they're looking at him and going, okay, well, you haven't got any assets behind you, but you've got access to cash and your own cash as well. And I think what's really important, and again, this comes back to the education thing, is there's this thing of, yeah, you can go out and go and do it with none of your own money. You can go and do it with no assets. You can go and do it with no experience. You can go and do it with none of this, none of that, none of that, none of that. And it's like, you've got to have something. There's got to be something that makes you a lendable borrower. And just walking in and going, I've got no assets, I've got no cash, I've got no investors, I've got no any of the, like, it doesn't paint a great picture. And that's what this episode is about, is kind of giving you that confidence that if you have come off of one of these god-awful courses, that actually you could go and have a proper conversation with someone and actually then go and get some lending. So the last thing they look for is your support network. So this is, have you got a good builder in place, good contractor? Have you got a good mentor? And one of the big things with this is, 5-6 years ago, we worked with Shawbrook, I think it was at the time. And we had a thing with Shawbrook where if you went on a certain course and worked with a certain mentor, you would get access to certain products. And it worked really well. It was a great product, and unfortunately inflated a few egos and unfortunately didn't work out in the end, but it was good while it was there. And I think certain development funders, if you've gone with certain mentors, it will open certain doors and it'll start the conversation. It won't get you finance, but it'll open the door to a conversation. The same goes for brokers as well. There are certain brokers, and I'm very lucky that we can kind of put ourselves into this bracket as well, but there are certain brokers that you can go to who have got good enough relationships with lenders whereby the lender knows that if you've come to us, you've got to have been of a certain standard. If we're entertaining it, they know that kind of you're not a joke, if you know what I mean. So not every broker can say that, unfortunately. There are quite a few of us who can, luckily, and it does help. So that support network of good builder, mentor, broker, good solicitor as well, that is probably where most deals fall down, because actually your solicitor, although not a direct reflection of you, falls into that competence camp. So we had a deal where, for example, the client would go to a solicitor, would give all the paperwork over. The solicitor would then be asking questions back to the client of, "Oh, are you sure you want to sign this? Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to? Do you understand that?" Almost as if he'd never seen the paperwork himself. He'd then go to the lender solicitor and would ask them mental questions, almost asking them to kind of help him to understand how to do his own job. So, can you tell me how I need to do this? Can you tell me how I need to do that? The problem is that although not a direct reflection of you, if you're using a solicitor like that, naturally the lender hears about it from a third party, i.e. their own solicitor, and starts to paint a picture. So I think getting a good solicitor in place, absolutely invaluable. So they're kind of the four main things that lenders are looking for in order to kind of make you a lendable borrower. So it's that honesty, competence, liquidity, support network. So they're those main things. Then when we start talking about actually presenting the deal, so let's say you've got those four things. You're an honest person, you're competent, you've got liquidity, you've got a support network. Great. Foot's in the door. At that point, you're then in front of an underwriter. Now, I always kind of look at this as almost a job interview. So you've got to imagine that some of the questions you're going to be asked are pretty personal, pretty invasive, and sometimes may seem over the top. But the thing is, you have to remember that these people are lending you millions of pounds in some circumstances. I mean, the biggest deal we've ever done is 14 point something million. That is a lot of money to go out the door. And the problem is and it's very easy to forget this, but if you don't pay that money back, it falls on the underwriter. Not for them to pay it back, of course, but it falls on the underwriter for essentially them to justify, well, we lent them the money because of X, Y, Z. So you have to think that these invasive questions, all of these documents that they ask for, all of this bit that you think, that seems a bit much. Just think if you were lending someone 20 quid down the pub, you'd probably ask a few questions as well. These guys are lending you 14 million. They're going to ask a few questions about it. So some of the things that you kind of need to, if we were going to call it a bit of a playbook. So these are the things that you want to get prepped. So first thing is you want to show your team. You want to show the strength of your team. You want to show where your team can pick up the slack, where maybe there are gaps in your knowledge. So, for example, I'm not a builder. Don't pretend to be a builder. I can barely put up a shelf. If I'm doing a development, which we've got a couple of active ones at the moment, my big thing has been showing off the contractor. So my big thing has been, here's our builder, here's his skills, here's what he can do, here's what he's built previously, here's where he's kept to the build cost, here's where he's actually come in under budget previously, here's where he's done such an incredible job. Look at him. Don't look at me. I'm not a builder. Look at me for the numbers. Absolutely. Look at him for doing the build, because I'm not going to be on site every day. I'm not going to be doing anything on site whatsoever. So yeah, just put a real focus on them. Then when it comes to planning conditions, for example, again, I'm not going to be there signing off the pre-commencements. I don't know what I'm doing with pre-commencements. I'm a broker. You stick development finance in front of me, I can run rings around most people. You stick pre-commencements in front of me, I've got no idea. So the big thing there is have a look at my planning consultant. They're the ones who are going to be signing off the pre-commencements. Here's what they've done previously. Here's their experience. Here's what they've achieved previously. Have a look at them. Then when it comes to the legal side of things, again, well, I mean, actually, to be fair, I did do a bit of conveyancing, but again, you're not going to be looking at me for the legals. Here's my solicitor. Here's what they've done previously. And here's where their competence is going to fill a skill gap, essentially. So show off that team. The lenders will look at that team to a degree more so than you. So the other thing is keep the scope realistic. So what I mean by that is if you are a first-time developer, don't try and then go and build 120 flats. It doesn't work. From a lender's perspective, they look at that and go, this is way too much risk. Like they will put you into a risk profile and they'll say, that's too much risk. We're not getting involved in a first-time developer building 120 flats. No chance. So what I always say to people is if you are a first-time developer, keep it to maybe 3 or 4 new build units, 3 or 4 houses, maybe 2 batches of 2 semis. So 2 semis. Like that's probably your max for new build. If you're doing a commercial conversion, maybe aim for 6 to 8 flats. So maybe an office into, maybe even down to 4 to 6 flats. Something smaller scale. Because from a lender's perspective, they want to see a gradual build-up. And it's very, very easy as human beings, human nature, to go, I need to go big straight away. Why would I put money into this smaller project when I can put money into something bigger and I can do something twice the size? But the thing is, from a lender's perspective, yes, you can go and put money into something twice the size, but the risk is twice the size, if not probably more. Because on something bigger like that, yes, all right, there's an economy of scale, but it's bigger. There's more that can go wrong. It just becomes a completely different beast. So, especially on new build as well, anything over 4 units, it's a completely different thing. So they want to see that gradual step up, building slowly. I mean, we've got a client at the moment who they've done, I don't know how many builds as a contractor. So they've done loads and loads of builds, but their first new build that they're doing for themselves is the conversion of 1 unit and 3 new builds. That's the first one that they're doing for themselves because it is a sensible first step. And for them, it's going to be great because they can either refinance or sell off the 3 units. They can refinance or sell the converted unit. The converted unit, they can still have something to work on if the weather's bad. Like, for example, today, I know for a fact that he's working in the converted unit or in the conversion of the unit as opposed to the new build because they can't lay bricks. So at least they've got something that they can fall back on. And lenders love to see that. So it's about keeping that scope realistic, about keeping it as a gradual step up. So that's another thing that makes you a lendable borrower is sensible expectations. The other thing is show contingency. There is nothing worse than a lender coming back, and don't get me wrong, we will always try and stop this from happening. But if for whatever reason it gets through, then the worst thing that can happen is for a lender to come back and say, where's the contingency? Because again, coming back to those kind of core bits that we spoke about earlier, under competence, if you forget a contingency, it's like the biggest thing that you can forget. And it just shows that if you haven't thought about that, what else haven't you thought about? So, like I said, we'll always try and act as a safety net to that to make sure that it's in there. The other thing you need to do is make sure that you choose the right product as well, because whilst this should fit within the broker's kind of scope of works, a lot of brokers won't understand some of the products that are available. So with development finance, they won't understand the nuances that are there. And it's not just about choosing the right product, it's about choosing the right lender as well. Because, for example, if a first-time developer comes to me, I'm not going to be putting them with the challenger banks. I'm just not, because they're never going to fit in with those lenders. So for me, it's about choosing the right tier of lender straight away and going, right, okay, you're a first-time developer, you've got some liquidity, you've got no assets, we're in tier B. We know that's where we sit. So straight away, right, I'm going to put you there. I'm not going to mess around trying to put you with a tier A lender because it just doesn't work. The other thing is building trust via documentation. And what I mean by that is how you present that documentation. And again, we get involved with a lot of this and we'll kind of put the packs together and kind of help present everything in a nice way. but how you put your documents together really does reflect on you. Because if you're doing an appraisal, for example, and you send us a spreadsheet that has a couple of numbers in there, and I'm talking like literally GDV, build costs, and then like what you're buying it for, maybe stamp duty and things like that, it doesn't show a high level of competence. If you're sending me a 15-page spreadsheet where every single cost is accounted for and it's beautifully presented and everything else, you're looking at a lendable case. We know that. However, you could also go too far that way, in that if you send me a 15-page document that you don't understand, you're presenting something that can later come and bite you on the backside. Because if we jump on a Zoom call with the lender and they go, oh, by the way, on page 13, you've mentioned this. Can you just explain what that means? And if you're sitting there going, oh, actually, I don't know because it's a template, that, again, doesn't sort of present you in the best way. So it's about presenting information in the right way, a concise way, but a competent way, and where you have a knowledge of what you're presenting and that ability to kind of go back to it and go, actually, yeah, that means that. And, oh, yeah, if you change that, something else will happen. And I've spent a lot of time, especially just pre-Christmas, spent a lot of time with a couple of borrowers who wanted to build out spreadsheets and essentially wanted to build out a spreadsheet that enabled them to do refurbs on HMOs, and they could kind of type in a few numbers and, right, okay, well, that changes. And it's about building up that knowledge of that spreadsheet to go, well, actually, I understand what all of this means. So if a lender ever goes, well, what are you referencing there? Oh, well, actually, that relates to this. And it's just that ability to be able to show it. And it just shows a competence behind understanding kind of what you're doing. So, yeah, that's a massive bit of that kind of playbook that you're putting together. And then the last bit is kind of your narrative, if you like. So this is the story that goes with everything. So we've kind of spoken about what lenders really want. So the kind of those 4 pillars that they want to see. Kind of spoken through the playbook that you need to put together. So kind of your documentation suite, if you like. This is about the story. So this is a consistent story. So in one of the previous episodes, we spoke about having a consistent story. When you're presenting your CV, don't present something that is, I've done X number of deals and here are my numbers. But actually then it transpires that you're a project manager, because lenders look at it and they don't like that. Straight away, that is a real turn off for a lender. If you've presented something as your work, your deals, everything else, it can have a massive impact if it then comes back and it turns out you're a project manager and it wasn't actually your deal. And where I've seen people caught out on this is they will say, well, I've done 27 developments. I made X amount of profit on each one of these. And then they're sitting there saying, oh, yeah, I've got no assets. I've got no cash in the bank. I've got no all of this, and sort of detailing down, oh, no, I haven't got any of that. But then you're looking at a CV that shows millions of pounds of profit, and you're like, well, hang on a minute, where's all the money off the last development that you did? Well, where's that been invested? Oh, no, that wasn't my money. I was a project manager. It just creates a very awkward conversation very early on. So having that story, having that CV, having it laid out properly, bring the team into it as well, that will really start to create a real argument to making you a lendable borrower. So hopefully that's been helpful. Like I said, as brokers, we really do try and kind of do a lot of this for you. But I would highly recommend sort of starting to prep some of this stuff. If you're looking at getting into any refurbs or developments or any property deals in 2026, I would absolutely recommend putting some of this stuff together. And yeah, hopefully that was helpful, and I'll catch you on the next one.